Do I really have to do cardio?
No.
How do we know if I'm overtraining?
Athlete ready?
Should I cut weight for this
Go.
competition?
How much protein am I supposed to always?
Is it ironic that a podcast about Strongman is hosted by a woman?
I think that's kind of the point.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to Lift and Load. My name is Christina Arthur, and this week we brought a guest that I've actually spoken to before, but this might be the first time you guys are meeting him. Harrison Fleetwood, thank you so much for coming on today.
No, that's great for coming on, and yeah, depending which order these get uploaded, thanks for having me back. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm Harrison. I'm a powerlifting and performance coach through MST systems and like my own kind of stuff. The performance side is kind of what I kind of push more. So that encompasses everything from like supplements, peptides, PEDs for enhanced athletes, general health and longevity stuff. So it's quite a big basket. But very excited to be on today.
It's funny. So Harrison and I spoke, 2 months ago, something like that.
Yeah.
One of the earlier episode recordings for Lift and Load. And your episode, we've had it in the editing process. We've been looking at it. And then I'm scrolling through my feed the other day and I see you posted a peptide cheat sheet. And I was like, pause. I was like, we need to circle back around on this guy because I cannot open my phone. I cannot talk to anyone without peptides or just the hot button of the fitness industry right now. Everyone's talking about it. And I've noticed a lot of people don't actually know what peptides are. They go, okay, is it a steroid? Is it a SARM? Is it an anabolic? Like, what is it? And I think strength sports have had peptides. It's been known about for a very long time. They've had a bit of we'll call it surgence in the mainstream media right now because of Ozempic and because of weight loss. And if you go to a person who's had any kind of, whether for diabetic reasons or weight loss reasons, have gone on any kind of semaglutide, GLP-1, etc., they don't realize they're taking peptides because it's just another name for it. So can you tell me, since you are kind of an expert in this area, can you tell me what are, I'd say, the main performance enhancing elements that people are using? We'll just narrow it to SARMs, anabolic steroids, and then let's dig into peptides a bit, because I'd like to go into what they are, what they aren't, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about the different types so that way people can know.
Yeah, I mean, this like big insurgence of peptides, I'm not sure where it's come from. I think mainly from like kind of health and longevity side. People are looking more into that kind of like wanting to kind of live longer and anti-age and that kind of side now. And like, yeah, I came about them probably about 10 years ago now, when like kind of BPC and TB were kind of coming up and coming as like kind of injury prevention and injury recovery things. So yeah, like you said, yeah, the main three ones that like kind of athletes look at now is like either steroids, SARMs or peptides. So like steroids and SARMs, I classify as like the same thing. They're structurally, chemically different. So like a steroid has to contain the main steroid structure of like testosterone, DHT. So it's like if you look on like a picture of it, it's like kind of like a shape of a structure, but that takes testosterone as a base, and then steroids, so like your Anavar, your Primobolan, just has like kind of attachments onto it to modify it slightly for like a slight change in action. So even though the chemical structure is fundamentally the same, like a hydrogen bond put here or something there changes how that gets utilized by the body, synthesized by the body. So, for example, like oral steroids, they're designed so they can get through first pass liver metabolism, or before the body would just kind of break it down and excrete it straight away. So it has to get past that first pass once you ingest it to get into the bloodstream then, and then start exerting its effects. SARMs are very similar. They've got a very different chemical structure. They go through a few different pathways to be broken down before they can then exert their effects at the androgen receptor. So once they are broken down and they bind to the androgen receptor, they still go through all the same kind of benefits and side effects as what steroids do, of like increasing muscle protein synthesis, increasing performance. But then like the side effects are still there. So impacts like blood markers like cholesterol will get skewed, liver markers might increase. And like with females, viralization risks are still there. Like they're not a female friendly steroid or option for steroids. I kind of put them two like in the same basket. like in terms of like choosing between one, for males, like I don't really see much use case for males. I think like their kind of surgence has been from a while, like a few years ago now, several years ago now. They were kind of pushed out there as being like side effect free steroids, like alternatives to steroids, and then it kind of like the name selective androgen receptor modulator. They were kind of pushed out as like, oh, they're selective in that they only interact with androgen receptors at the muscle tissue, which is where the increase, like get muscle increase from. But it was soon in studies saw that they're not selective. They will interact with like androgen receptors like throughout the body, so the liver, kidneys, all organs and everything. So yeah, the side effects are still there with these things, so they shouldn't be taken lightly in any sense. And then yeah, peptide is just a structure of amino acids. So to be classed as a peptide, it has to have two or more amino acid structures together. So if you have like a long chain of amino acids, all they are is different sequences of amino acids put together to exert their effect. Once synthesized in the body, they go off and then can like do whatever they need to do, like at a cellular level. So yeah, between 2 to 50 amino acids is a peptide. More than 50 up to I believe 100 is a polypeptide, and then more than 100 is a protein. So like a full chain of amino acids is a protein. So yeah, like when you look at things like semaglutide, yeah, they're peptides because they're just a chain of amino acids. In the exact same way that insulin itself is a peptide. It was technically the first peptide that was created when it was kind of structured together. I think it was in the 50s when it kind of became a thing, but it was extracted from beta cells on like animal pancreases, I believe. And it wasn't until the 1980s when the first kind of synthetic peptide of insulin was kind of structured together, and that's kind of where. So like peptides have always been there. Like type 1 diabetics like need insulin to live. So they've always been there. Just no one's really known about it until like the recent years where they've kind of really been pushed out there with like more like weight loss aids.
Would you say that the fitness industry is kind of taking hold of the word peptide? Because I feel like it's like everyone's just talking as a catch-all. They're like, peptides are the way to the future, but they've been around forever, right? So what are the different types, right? So I'll call it, let me back up. What are the main categories that you're seeing in the fitness industry that people are utilizing beyond, I don't want to dig too much into diabetic and because that is, a whole other conversation. That is a whole medical stream, but recreationally, people are using them to either help in recovery or performance. And that is an area that you've been, I know, researching and leaning more into with that cheat sheet you put out. So what are the main, we'll call it groupings? I know there's some to help with sleep, there's some to help with et cetera, et cetera. And then what have you seen between clients, research, and what works, what doesn't? I mean,
I think it's like, it's a funny one for me. Like I see like everyone talking about them now, like everyone's is like affiliated with them. They're pushing them out there. And I do think they're kind of being pushed a bit too frivolously in that, like there's still risk with these things. They are they're kind of getting pushed as these, like there's like absolutely no side effects. And while they are like, yeah, generally really well tolerated as opposed to like steroids and SARMs like we're discussing, they still come with like, it still opens up that doorway. Like there is still that entry level, like a lot of them are injectable. So it is like, you've got that kind of stepping stone if you are injecting an exogenous substance into your body. So there is that side to it as well to come to an end. There's the kind of complexities of like, right, well, how do I get this powder into a liquid? And then what dose do I pull from that? Which is kind of, that's what the cheat sheet was kind of set out to do. It's like the cheat sheet isn't like like 100% this is gospel, this is how you take all these things. It's kind of like an entry level into it. Like the doses and like duration of things I've put in there are like very like low end of the scale. Like it's not like that's the only use case for them. Like I had a lot of messages off the back of it being like, well, what dose can I take for this, this and this? I'm like, well, that's like a whole different conversation. Like this is kind of more general, put it out there. It's not an individual, like look at your situation kind of thing. I could have gone into all the different kind of protocols you could use, but it would have been about 200 pages long at that point.
You would have written an entire book at that point.
Yeah. And
it's no longer a cheat sheet.
No, exactly. Yeah, but what I do after this one is, because it had such a good response, what I kind of put a more kind of in-depth one out, which kind of dives deep into each one. And
that I'm gonna, first thing that jumps in my head when you say that, because I've heard that before, where peptides, and depends on the type, can be incredible, but if you have any kind of predisposition, recognize that it's going to accelerate all the things. And do you watch much Marvel? So Captain
Yeah.
America. It makes me think of Captain America, the first one, when the doctor said the serum makes good and bad worse. Or that's the general. So no one catch me on that quote. But that's essentially what it did. And that's why Steve Rogers was great, right? Because he had so much good that the serum made him more good. But then what Red Skull, it made him worse. I will find many ways to turn life into comic books, and so, but that's not far from the truth, right? If you're going to take any kind of enhancement of anything, and I will give all the disclaimer, I don't recommend this for a lot of athletes, mainly the ones that I'm working with, because I have a lot of new and novice, and I think people make their own choices when it comes to fitness. And if you're elite, you've got a whole different set of needs, but people jump to them for shortcuts. And if you're not already putting in the work, and if you're not already, at a point where you cannot get any further without just, good old hard work, why are you bothering? And that's because there's risks and there's side effects. I believe when I was taking a look at it, I'm glad you mentioned the neurological component, because some peptides advertise for like neuro, right? And so there are ones that help the mental side. So I'm not familiar with those, to be honest. I've heard everyone talks about nootropics and, ways of unlocking human potential in the brain, blah, blah, blah. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, the newer ones are interesting. So I put 4 in there. Like there is a bunch more, but I kept it simple with 4. So I put C-Lank, C-Max, Cortigen, and cerebral lysin in there. And the C-Lank and C-Max ones are good for, like, my kind of use case for those ones is they're really good at people who are just get kind of really anxious. So just to go back a step with these things as well, like, one thing that is happening is a lot of natural athletes, and especially tested athletes as well, are kind of looking at these things and kind of leaning towards them. And I don't class these as like natural compounds, because they can elicit a lot of actions that can't achieve naturally. So like BPC, I think BPC is actually on the WADA banned list now, and they do actually test for BPC. Like whether all of these will get picked up in the WADA test, I don't know. But I always kind of put it out there, like, I don't put these things on natural athletes. So like the ebook there is like I said, it's kind of a reference for people. But for other athletes where that's not kind of concern, things like the C-Lank and C-Max is more for just kind of really driving up that focus and like anti-anxiety side of things. So people who get really anxious before like big events or big lifts in the gym, or like coming up to a competition, just having like these ones kind of come in a nasal spray as well. So like having like a shot administer it nasally with these things can just kind of down-regulate that anxiety a little bit and just keep them a bit more level-headed. So like when they come up to a lift, that anxiety is not kind of playing too much into like making a mistake here and there and costing them points in an event or missing a lift because it's like set the foot position wrong or something like that. So they kind of keep people a bit more like really level-headed in that sense. Like C-Max is like really good for that kind of focus as well. If you just like for humans, like take these like as and when needed, not so strictly limited to lifting. So if you've got like a long day, a long weekend of coaching or something, it just keep you in that kind of flow state with your coaching and working just through like programs and things like that. So like really flexible. Like that's the thing with peptides, they are really flexible in what they do. And then like cerebral lysin and cortigen, I think like cerebral lysin especially was developed for like traumatic brain injuries, I believe. But that's really good for people who, when they're kind of doing really intense lifting, really neural focused lifting, when they're kind of getting really mentally drained and mentally trashed. Like for me, example, if I do like a heavy squat, I don't know what day of the week it is. Once I've kind of re-racked that weight, taking cerebral lysin like pre-bed can just kind of speed up that like neurological recovery, just keep me a bit more neurally recovered between those heavy lifts. So when I come to the next session, it kind of gives more productive, progressive sessions through a comp prep. Instead of coming in for like the following week, I'm still carrying a bit of that neural fatigue. When I come like to deadlift or squat, it feels like I don't know how to squat anymore because I'm just so neurally drained from that previous week still. So yeah, the neuropeptides are really interesting in that kind of area, especially like I said, for people who suffer chronically with that, just that pre-lifting anxiety. There's a lot of like meditative practices people can come in, but like if it's just like a nasal spray, take a shot or two up each nostril before going up onto the platform, can just help just kind of bring that anxiety down. So yeah, like really cool peptides.
That's interesting. So that's a nasal spray. I know we've talked about injectables, and I think you mentioned that some can be oral. does it depend on the peptide? What is more, bioavailable? How does that work?
No, yeah. So like, there's so the C-Lank and C-Max, like, yeah, they can come in nasal spray. They're injectable as well. BPC can come in a nasal spray format as well. So it's just kind of more way to kind of like absorbs through like a nasal cavity. Some of it will kind of make its way down to the stomach as well. Certain ones, it kind of argued how bioavailable they are. Like bioavailability, like injectable will always win in terms of that. There's no way about it. BPC, it depends on the capsule form you get. So I think there's two. There's BPC ARG and BPC HCl, and HCl gets broken down really quickly in the stomach acid before it can really get absorbed. ARG can survive the stomach and get absorbed, so it's a bit more better for it. It's more expensive for that reason. But so there's all like these different ways of trying to make it more bioavailable.
I feel like there's got to be some kind of placebo effect too with smelling salts. Like people are used to like a sniff and like, okay, it's time to go. I really wonder if a nasal spray, just because of that, it's in your head, if that plays a factor. I have no way of quantifying that, but
very good chance there is. Yeah, I think. Well, then even still, I think placebo effects. Like if they think that, oh, this is doing something, like if it's not doing anything, it is purely placebo. Yeah, it's probably like wasting the money. But if it is still bringing that anxiety down, is to have a really good competition, and it's worth it at the same time.
Yeah, no, definitely. So let's dig into the one that the most people probably think of, and that's the weight loss ones, right? So there's semaglutide, there's tirzepatide. So there's a couple different key ones. I had always heard that for strength athletes, they were not recommended because they were in some way catabolic and they could harm muscle gains. And then I've heard the complete counter argument that if you microdose it or if you are really careful about it, it'll just help burn that baseline fat and or help with inflammation. And I've heard everything in between. So I personally have even gotten completely contradictory information just from friends and contacts in the industry. What have you seen? Do you have any thoughts there? Because that's something that, people will use for obvious, like there's diabetic reasons, there's extreme obesity. And then strength athletes are kind of flirting with it. And they go, okay, well, if I'm a weight class athlete or if I suffer from inflammation, maybe I have something like, I've heard PCOS they can help with. So where does that simile in?
Yeah, so when you're looking at the main three ones now, so like you've got your sema, your tirzepatide, your retatrutide, they're very different to how they work. So semaglutide is most, like Ozempic is the most known one, which is just a simple like GLP-1 receptor agonist. So all that's doing is just purely blunting that hunger. So its main action is just making people feel full when they're not full. But I think the risks of, like you were saying, with the muscle wastage, people find themselves in a mess is purely because that feeling of fullness is that like demanding, is that you're just not eating, so you're just getting themselves in a nutrient deficient state where they're just not eating enough food, or the small meals they are just aren't nutrient dense in that way. And with slowing down, it slows down gut motility as well, so that food just isn't getting digested properly as well, what that little they are eating. And it's got a lot of interesting things as well, like people who are kind of do binge eat a lot, tend to have that kind of tendency to like get addicted to food. It can kind of rewire the brain to how they think about food as well. So the big issues are with it that do stand out for especially Gen Pop people is when they come off, they haven't had the education or the understanding of like going back to the bad habits they had previously. They're just going to put all that weight back on. There is that. I think that's where it's lacking the most with these weight loss drugs, is that kind of aftercare with it, where you see a lot of people rebounding back up straight away. But in some people, it can rewire the brain to just look at food differently, because the feeling is like when you are kind of deep into semaglutide, if you are on quite a high doses, like just the thought of food makes you feel like you're going to throw up. Like it is just completely off-putting. So again, that's where it comes from, where like people just won't eat because they've kind of gone too far with it, where they're associating food with that feeling sick now, so they just won't touch it. And then that's where they kind of find themselves in a mess. And then there's a lot of things, like I've been reading studies on it again with like about it with like drug addiction as well, just like rewiring. I think there's one study looking at cocaine addiction, like how it kind of rewired the brain to come off like that addiction as well. So there's a lot of interesting
I've heard
things
that. And with gambling too.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting things what goes on in the brain with it as well, just kind of rewire people that little bit differently. But again, it's just that understanding of them. Like with muscle wastage, if we're looking at athletes, as long as you're getting like your protein in, you're exercising, like that catabolic state isn't going to be induced as much, because like it's like you lose it or use it or lose it kind of scenario with it, and just making sure you're getting your baseline nutrition in and keeping everything like as it should be with eating. Like they should just be used, for me, I see them more as just being used just to take that edge off the hunger, especially like you were saying with weight class athletes. If it makes that weight cut a little bit easier, just taking that craving off to go and eat during a weight cut, like I think there's a lot of benefits there for strength athletes, definitely.
No doubt. And I'm sure that, this is something that people across various industries and that have maybe not been exposed to it previously, now because of the Gen Pop awareness, it might become more and more prevalent. And that's where, when we were taking a look again, I bet if I opened my Instagram right now and scrolled past like maybe 20 posts, I'd see the word peptides from someone. So, I think as a creature, human beings love shortcuts. I think we love cheat sheets. I think we love, getting that next step forward. I mean, shoot, myself included, if I have an easy path and a hard path and it's going to get me to my goal, it's the easy path is tempting, right? And so the problem I can see with peptides is people, again, not understanding. They go, oh, it's a no side effect cheat sheet. And then you've got ages and you've got health, there's so many different things that people take. Oh, it works for everyone. It's a miracle concept. I mean, science fiction's been warning us about stuff like that for 50 years. However, there are some incredible use cases, and there are some really good ways people can use it to get them to their goals in a safe way that arguably are much safer than, jumping to the extreme, right? If you've got a really promising athlete, mid-20s, whatever it is, they're an adult, they can make their own decisions. And instead of going for the extreme anabolics, like maybe they're like, oh, well, I just wasn't recovering and I'm not training enough. Like maybe I try something else. And that's the other side of the coin. I think that's where peptides can be great, is that they're not an extreme. They're an assisting, I'd say. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think they are really powerful things. Like for injury recovery, I've seen them being used. Well, I did a injury recovery protocol with one of my athletes. They had a double hamstring tear last year, and they were recovered, ready for comp within 6 weeks. It was really like kind of intensive, aggressive dose of like BPC, TB, and GHKCU, a copper peptide. But to go from like a double hamstring tear to getting all three lifts at a powerlifting comp on deadlifts and things, like shows how much they can kind of speed up that recovery process with things. And I think where they really shine, it's like, even though I broke the spreadsheet, the cheat sheet down into different categories, and there was one for longevity, in that everyone in there longevity kind of circles everything really, because they do work in those pathways to increase like cellular efficiency and mitochondrial health and cellular health. And I think that's where peptides are really gonna shine. Not just peptides, like supplements as well. Supplement use, like a lot of people see the amount of supplements I take and like, oh, do you really need all that? And it's like, well, for me, it's more like where I'm going to be in like 50 years time when I'm like 85 years old. I want to be kind of doing all the stuff now, so when I get to that age, I can like achieve my goal of living to 100 years old.
Oh, and with a good quality of life. Like I take joint supplements now, and I'm like, I don't technically probably need them, but I will absolutely take my joint supplements. And then, I feel, and this is kind of my hot take on it, I think there's a bit of a bell curve of human life expectancy and overall health, where longevity of it. So if you look at the average human life expectancy, 200-300 years ago, it was considerably shorter than it is today, both in quality and in expectancy. I mean, you look at middle ages, you're hearing of, people dying in their, 40s, 50s, whatever it is. And they had lived a pretty full life. Take to the 19th century, that starts going up. 20th century starts going up. The Industrial Revolution had an incredible effect on both our longevity and quality of life, and I think could have also been one of the worst things for us from a purely health perspective, because it rapidly accelerated, look at the different things in our food, look at everything from human lifestyle. If you take a look at the difference in aging, and this is actually, skincare companies are having a field day with this, millennials who are older and Gen Z who are younger, millennials have been aging less quickly than Gen Z, is what a lot of even like skincare, et cetera, different tangents on the internet have shown. And some of it's stress because of, again, society as we know it, there's a lot more pressure. So people are aging. Some of it's sun, where millennials were a parent apparently. I wasn't one of them. I've now gotten pretty good, but they weren't as good with sunscreen. Gen Z wasn't, as big on sunscreen. And I'm giving gross generalizations, but as a whole, we're seeing, kind of on this downward curve where people are going to start aging poorly again. And that is not me calling all of the 21-year-olds out there that you look like you're 35, but some of you do. And so life's hard, and it arguably has always been difficult. However, there's so much more on the young people today where I wouldn't be surprised if there was a downward curve on life expectancy and overall quality. And so that's something that the world is developing and the world is changing. And so we do need to look into, alternative methods to continue the trajectory. I'd love to live to 100, but if I'm immobile by 75, I don't want to live to 100. Like, I'm good. And so the age and quality of life is so relevant. And I think peptides are a really interesting way to get there. When you talk about the longevity ones, and I know you go into this a little on your sheet, but for those of the people not looking at it, is it, any of them can help with longevity? Or is it there's some specific ones that have really shown positive effects on the anti-aging process? Without locking yourself into doctor territory, because I already know we're going to get skewered by doctors for this one.
Yeah, so the longevity one, I touched on with the growth hormone peptides that are in there. So what those growth hormone peptides do is that they don't increase your growth hormone levels. They just kind of act as a mechanism to release your own body's natural growth hormones. So you take it, it will interact with whichever ones you take. There's a couple of ways they work. You've got what's called the ghrelin mimicking ones, which stimulate hunger on the ghrelin receptor, which is what releases growth hormone. And then there's the ones that interact with the pituitary gland directly in your brain, which sends a signal to release growth hormone. When you think about growth hormone as well, just to kind of go off on understanding what growth hormone is, it's not just one hormone. There's several different molecules to that growth, what builds up growth hormone, all different kind of size of molecules, and those different sizes work slightly differently. So the main two, it's measured in a measurement called kilodaltons, like KDA. The main two that are most prevalent in growth hormone when it's secreted is 20 and 22 KDA, and then the 17.5, which is the most prevalent, which acts as like an antagonist. So it I see it as like a rate limit of not exposing yourself to too much growth hormone, because if your growth hormone levels are too high, that's what acromegaly is, where hands and feet and lips and growth is just kind of through the roof, because IGF-1 levels are through the roof as a result of that. So your body kind of has these kind of measures in place. So your body releases growth hormone in a night. So this could be your natural production or using these peptides. So when you look at it from a longevity perspective, getting older you're seeing those growth hormone levels decline, IGF-1 levels decline. So recovery is starting to kind of slow down as you get older. And then through that growth hormone declining, things like your immune system start declining because the interaction with your thymus gland, where your immune cells are kind of produced from, that starts kind of down-regulating. So that immune response and clearing up that oxidative stress and inflammatory responses starts down-regulating. So that's where kind of excess stress starts becoming exponential in terms of the aging process. The aging starts to speed up at that point. So the longevity of peptides around the growth hormone, I appreciate that was a really, really simplification of the process. A lot deeper in that, but it just keeps that baseline level there, just to push that recovery that little bit more, that cell regeneration, cell growth that little bit more as well. And I put one in there, Epitalon. That's a really interesting one, purely from an anti-aging perspective, that it works directly on the pineal gland in the brain. And when we look at aging, so if you look at the DNA, chromosome and the chromosomes, they've got these caps on the end, telomeres, which as aging, they're there to protect the chromosomes themselves from damage. Aging processes those telomeres kind of shortening, so those caps are kind of getting worn down over time. And that's just the aging process as well. But high levels of inflammation, oxidative stress can speed up that process, as that oxidative stress is kind of latching onto that DNA, causing DNA damage. So Epitalon, well, there's a enzyme called telomerase, which is used to build up those caps to make them stronger and bigger and longer. Over aging, that activity slows down as well. So Epitalon can be used to kind of increase that expression of that enzyme again and protect DNA. So that's it's a really interesting one, because The protocol is in the studies was a 10-day protocol. I think you do it once a year, but only do it twice, and it does like a massive amount of anti-aging process just from that kind of protocol. It's an expensive protocol to use that when you're looking at like a lot of things like that, like really exotic peptides for anti-aging. The price like substantially goes up for those kind of things. So it is more like for people who have that disposable income, who can afford to spend a little bit more. They're the nice to have. So like if you are really looking down the health and longevity side of anti-aging purposes, and then so through that, like just protecting through like something like epitalon, protecting oxidative stress at a DNA level and anti-aging at a DNA level. When those chromosomes get too damaged, that's where like DNA expression starts to get a bit impaired. So like gene expression, so just gene expression, like turning on and off genes. So that can be anything from like more pro-inflammatory gene expression. So that's going to kind of exert more damage, and like the good kind of gene expression being turned off. So like increase in recovery being turned off. Like so, like post-workout, you'll have all this gene expression to start pushing all these recovery pathways. Those kind of genes start getting switched off and it's kind of start causing more damage because it's more pro-inflammatory environment then. Again, really simple explanation, but just trying to kind of frame it in a way where we can understand what kind of gene expression is. Like BPC, I see from a healing peptide perspective, I see that more as like it's like a beacon for recovery. So however you take it, like orally inject it. If you're injecting it like at the site of an injury, so you've torn your quad, for example, and inject it straight into the quad, it's going to go in there and act as like a beacon to be like, we need to direct things here. It will balance out inflammatory response a little bit more favorably. So you've got like, so there's no real like bad inflammation. Like all inflammation is like good, your body needs it. It's when that kind of inflammation gets too much and it starts slowing down the process because like things like oxygen can't get to the area properly, blood, and there's too much kind of blood being pushed to that area and not enough good stuff getting to that area. So BPC can kind of balance that out a little bit. It's just make a more favorable environment for a recovery in that sense in terms of repairing the muscle itself. GHK copper peptides are really good for like stem cell migration and proliferation. So stem cells being like just a cell, but they get differentiated into being what you need to do. So for muscle recovery, they'll get turned into building up muscle tissue. So it's really good for stimulating that effect as well. So KPV that's on there, that's really good for gut health. I see KPV as like a really strong gut health one where it can really modulate that histamine response with mast cells. So if you're eating something that triggers a really high histamine response, and you're getting that kind of flare out of like kind of like red cheeks and things, or like kind of like looking like hives is breaking out. And that high histamine, it can really downregulate that side. It's got a lot of good stuff for good benefits, of antimicrobial benefits against SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and small intestinal fungal overgrowth as well, of just like keeping that down. So if you're thinking gut health, yeah, again, everything that kind of plays into like your bigger picture, just like longevity really, because a lot of these things like, SIBO and SIFO can go unnoticed for years potentially before they start becoming a thing. And by that point, potentially too late, because things like Hashimoto's, like autoimmune issues, sometimes a lot of the time can stem from gut issues where that gut dysbiosis starts through whatever means, trends into leaky gut, the toxins start leaking into the bloodstream, that like molecular mimicry, like with gluten and the thyroid hormone, your body starts turning on it, starts turning on the thyroids, and then that's where all those issues start stemming from then.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. So I'm really glad you mentioned that too, because in our episode with Celia, we talk heavily on gut health and the connection between how that can affect autoimmune and other parts of the body. So that is a connection more and more people are making. So I appreciate you bringing it up. And I also, was thinking back about the benefits of it, and you mentioned, putting it directly into the quad. There's got to be benefits if people are willing to shove a needle into a torn quad. So I'll put it as, it doesn't work. If people are willing to do that, probably. But this has been really fascinating, and I know you're researching more into it. So as your year goes on, and I know you've doubled down hard into your coaching career and researching all these things, I think it'll be cool to check back and see what else you've learned. So I appreciate you coming on today.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's great. I love coming on, and happy to come on again. And yeah, definitely like us. Where I want to go with this as well is build on from this kind of cheat sheet and just kind of have more education around each one, so people can just have like a resource there to really understand what these things are, how they work, what they're essentially putting into the body. Because like I was saying, the doses on here are really kind of low level doses. But when people start on these things, like how they use these things, how they respond to them is like so unknown between people. It's like 100% on them to be like taking ownership of what they're doing with these things, instead of just like taking them recklessly and just hoping for the best. Like understand, like listen to your body. Like if you've taken it and you don't feel good taking it, like don't force yourself to take it. You don't have to take these things. They're there as like nice to have. Yeah, they'll speed up recovery that little bit. But yeah, just take. I think more people just like need to, instead of being like sucked into all these adverts that are coming about with peptides, just like spend some time just like researching them yourself and making a more executive decision if it is the right path to go on. Because yeah, like injury prevention, yeah, they're great, but I see people turning to them like they've got a little bit of tendonitis in their elbow or knee or something like that, and it's like, oh, I need to reach for peptide. It's like, well, what have you done before this point? Like there's a million other things you can do to try and combat this. Like the peptides will take the edge off of the discomfort and the pain for sure, but it's not going to fix tendonitis. You need to look at what's caused that tendonitis to begin with and get those bits put in place, because as soon as they come off the peptides, that tendonitis pain will just flare straight back up because it's just masked the issue, essentially, not fixed the issue.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, because I do, going back to the whole, people love skipping steps. So
yeah,
great example. My wrist has been giving me issues forever. I went and I got some like dry needling and massage done the other week, which was an adventure, but worked really, really well. And that's just like a deep tissue, thing, like acupuncture on it. And that made it feel loads better. And then I was talking to, she does sports medicine and she's a chiropractor, and we're going to do some exercises and normal things to fix angry tendons. I'm not jumping straight for a needle. And I think that's where people need to know the threshold, and they need to know, did you do the hard work, or are you, jumping ahead? So that's a good point. Well, yeah, again, thank you. This has been awesome. Everyone, highly, highly recommend checking out arguably my favorite Instagram handle name ever, which is Harry Squatter. And I just love that because I'm a nerd for Harry Potter in general. But we will drop that in the description below. And then you have the link to the cheat sheet in your bio, correct?
Yeah. I've got a Linktree link, and I think it's top link on there. So anyone goes up on Instagram, clicks that link, they'll get linked directly to it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Harrison, and we'll talk to you soon.
That's been great. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Speak to you soon.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.